name is Jackie Mahoney. I am a show designer, show manager, lead actor, supporting actor, and a little bit of everything with live history. And I play Julia Cervenka in our show Roundtable International Waters. And today I wanted to tell you a bit about my personal connection to the show. So in the show, Julia is a stewardess aboard the Carpathia, as she was in real life. And in the show, it is her birthday, and she's having a surprise party thrown for her by her best friend Kay, who she hasn't seen in many years because Kay just went off and decided that she wanted to travel the world. And so Julia's loving boyfriend at the time, named Vernon Livermore, he's decided to throw her a surprise birthday party. And so that's why all of the guests are invited. And Livermore, Vernon was her boyfriend in real life and later became her husband. And both Julia and Vernon were aboard the Carpathia on the night of the Titanic sinking. And they were both later given special commendations for their assistance during the night of the Titanic sinking when they went to rescue all of the passengers. And poor Vernon, though, he then went on to also be on the RMS Lusitania, and on the night of that sinking, but thankfully he survived. He also had to go through World War I and World War II, also survived both of those. Must have a lucky streak going on there. But Julia and Vernon married about a year after the sinking of the Titanic, and they settled in Liverpool, Livermore from Liverpool. And they had one daughter together, and that's them. So today I wanted to tell you about my personal connection to the show. And, first I want to talk about how much, I love ships. I am a huge nerd about old ships. That's one of my personal connections. As you can see behind me, I've got my giant stack of books on the Titanic. So I've been interested in old ships, specifically the Titanic, unsurprisingly, since I was a kid. It started with this Titanic experience that they had at the Ontario Science Centre, and you went in and you got a Titanic ticket of a person who was really on the ship, and you went through the exhibit, and at the end you got to see if your person really survived. And of course I can't remember the name of my young woman, but she was a third-class passenger, and the whole way through I was like, oh, I know third-class passengers didn't live because a lot of them weren't given spaces in the lifeboats and things like that. But then at the end I discovered that she did survive. And so that kind of was what set off my passion for me. And so I've now visited almost every museum that has any exhibit on the Titanic or on old Cunard or White Star ships. I've been to the Maritime Museum in Halifax. That one's fantastic. I went to the Titanic Museum in Belfast. Not as fantastic. I didn't actually really enjoy that one. But I also went to the Ulster Transport Museum, which is near Belfast. That was absolutely wonderful. Any other ones? Oh yeah, the Titanic Memorial Park in New York. That's not a museum, it's just a lighthouse memorial in New York. But anywhere there's anything to do with the Titanic, I have been, because I'm a nerd. So that's one of my personal connections to the show. And when Life History said that they were doing a show set aboard the Carpathia, I was like, did you just, read my mind and choose exactly what I wanted to do for a show? But my more personal connection to the Carpathia is that my great-grandfather, Sidney Warner Akins, traveled aboard the Carpathia on June 22nd, 1906. And I actually have a copy of one of the letters that he wrote while he was on board to his brother Ted. And now this is a terrible printed-off copy, but you can see at the top there, you've got the RMS Carpathia letterhead. He's got... The writing is very hard to read because he wrote on both sides, and it is very, very, very thin parchment. But it's in a nice long letter to his brother, which my aunt very lovingly transcribed for me. I would not have had the patience to try and figure out what all of this said. So a little bit about Warner. He liked being called Warner instead of Sidney. Was that he was aboard the Carpathia because he was traveling to Europe. He was going on a European adventure. And this was really great for Roundtable International Waters because the character of Kay in the show, she is an adventurer. She leaves the Carpathia, which is where she and Julia worked, because she wants to go and she wants to see the world. And so in the show, we've woven the letter and character of my great-grandfather into the show, so that Kay runs into him on board the ship one day, and he's mailing these letters. This letter right here, haha. to his brother, and he tells her about all of the wonderful places he's going to visit, and she becomes inspired. And so that is part of what encourages Kay to go on her world tour. And so that's how we included this letter in the show. And I wanted to actually read the letter really quickly, just so that everyone could have an idea of what some of the things that someone aboard one of these ships would have written. So here it is. Dear Ted, we caught sight of land this morning around 11 o'clock and have first passed Cape Vincent and expect to arrive at Gibraltar early tomorrow morning and spend 4 or 5 hours there seeing the sights. We have just passed the Saxonia, a sister ship on the route. We had pretty good weather, then there's some illegible words. 3 days of illegible. Wasn't sick but felt a little grumpy once or twice just before meals. Now if that isn't relatable, I don't know what is. We had a great trip, and I am sorry that it is all me, meaning that he was the one taking it, not Ted, his brother. A whole fleet of girls on board, and almost half a dozen boys, mostly all college grads, almost a dozen college professors, and a couple of dozen artists. I spent most of the time playing shuffleboard and whist. Whist was a very popular card game. Have not done much reading and have done a good deal of gaffing, a word which here means foolish talk. This boat is almost 3 years old and is almost the steadiest ship afloat according to the crew. So if this was 1906, the Carpathia was built in 1903, which meant it was 3 years old, as he said. The captain is an Australian and he's a corker. I think the Australian was English. The captain was English. His name was Captain Arthur Rostron, and I have to double check about that. I think he was English. Was he Australian? I think he was English. I apologize if I'm wrong. She runs about 13 knots an hour, but that suits me about right, and I am used to slow traveling and would not mind going right back. Our trip will be almost as we planned it, but we'll cut off if some funds run short. Suppose that your exam is over now and that you are planning to come to London. Do come over as early as you can so we can have a good little trip to England together. So Warner was writing to Ted to tell him that he was going to England and that he should join him. Saunders, don't know who that is a pretty good head. I didn't know what that meant, but my coworker Ian, he was like, oh, it probably means that he's got a pretty good head on his shoulders, which made sense to me. And we get along pretty well together. The boat is chock full of boarding school graduates, so we don't lack from company when we want it. I had a pretty good concert last night and games a couple of days ago. There's a fellow here, Dr. Wardyal of Chicago, who's going to Vienna to study. He is a pretty good head, and we are pretty good friends. There's that phrase again. There is also a Turk on board, Muhammad Khalid, who is very decent, and we have some good talks together. He, illegible, Turkish, illegible, to New York from Constantinople, illegible, Turkish cigarettes. We'll address this to Napanee, that's Napanee, Ontario, as I don't know where you will be. Let me, illegible, the illegible, cut out cobalt as soon as you can come over. I don't know what that means. Give my kindest regards to all the bunch in Napanee and any in Toronto if you are there. We'll write a note later if you have time. If I have time. Yours sincerely, Warner. P.S. Lot done twice in New York. I didn't know what that meant, but my aunt says ship might have had to turn around and go back to New York for some reason, meaning Warner got to visit there for a bit longer. All right, so that is the letter that my great-grandfather wrote when he was aboard the Carpathia. Thanks for listening and hearing about my personal connection to the RMS Carpathia, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye!